If you're watching this right now, I want to start by telling you something that maybe you haven't heard in a while. You're not done yet. I don't care if you're 62, 67, 75, or even 82. I don't care if you just retired last month, or if you've been retired for 15 years. I don't care if your knees ache a little more than they used to, or if the world feels faster than it did back in 1975. You are not done. Your story is not over. In fact, this chapter might be the most powerful one yet. For decades, you showed up. You woke up early. You built careers. You raised children. You paid mortgages. You survived recessions, wars, inflation, gas lines, technology revolutions, and cultural shifts that would overwhelm most younger generations today. You adapted from rotary phones to smartphones, from black and white TVs to streaming platforms, from handwritten letters to text messages. You've already reinvented yourself more times than you probably realize. But something strange happens when retirement arrives in America. Society claps for you at the retirement party, gives you a gold watch, maybe a cake, maybe a handshake, and then quietly expects you to step aside, to slow down, to fade out, to make room. And somewhere deep inside, if you're honest, maybe you've wondered, is this it? Is this the part where I gradually become less relevant, less needed, less important? Let me tell you something clearly and without hesitation. That is a lie. Retirement is not the end of usefulness. It's the beginning of freedom. For the first time in decades, your time belongs to you. No alarm clock you didn't set, no boss evaluating your performance, no office politics, no commuting in rush hour traffic, no sacrificing your health for deadlines. You have something now that most people in their 30s and 40s would trade almost anything for: autonomy. And autonomy is power. The question is not whether you still matter. The question is what you're going to do with this freedom. Across the United States right now, seniors are doing something extraordinary. They are starting businesses at 65. They are writing books at 70. They are going back to college at 68. They are learning to paint, to travel solo, to mentor young entrepreneurs, to volunteer in their communities, to start YouTube channels, to get in the best shape of their lives at 72. They are refusing to quietly disappear. They are reinventing themselves. And if they can do it, so can you. Now I know what some of you might be thinking. That sounds inspiring, but that's not me. I'm tired. I've worked hard. I don't have the same energy I used to. Of course you don't. You're not supposed to. Reinvention at 65 doesn't look like reinvention at 25. At 25, reinvention is fueled by ambition and urgency. At 65, reinvention is fueled by wisdom and clarity. And wisdom is far more powerful. In your younger years, you did what you had to do. You chose stability over passion sometimes. You chose responsibility over risk. You made decisions for your family, not just for yourself. That was noble. That was necessary. But now? Now you have the chance to ask a question that you may not have asked in decades. What do I want? Not what does my boss want? Not what do my children need? Not what does society expect? What do I want? That question can feel uncomfortable. It can even feel selfish. But it isn't. It's honest. And honesty is the foundation of reinvention. Maybe you've always wanted to teach. Maybe you've always wanted to start a small woodworking shop in your garage. Maybe you've always wanted to travel across America in an RV and see the national parks you were too busy to visit. Maybe you want to finally prioritize your health and prove to yourself that 70 is not old, it's experienced. Here's something powerful to remember. You are not starting from scratch. You are starting from experience. Every mistake you made in your 30s, that's wisdom now. Every difficult boss you handled, that's emotional intelligence now. Every financial challenge you survived, that's resilience now. Every heartbreak, every setback, every unexpected detour, those are tools in your belt. A 25-year-old may have speed, but you have perspective. And perspective is priceless. The American dream was never meant to expire at retirement. It was meant to evolve. For many of you, this is the first season of life where your identity is no longer tied to a job title. You're not the manager, the nurse, the mechanic, the teacher, the executive. You are simply you. That can feel disorienting, but it can also feel liberating. When your identity is no longer locked into one lane, you can explore new ones. You can become a mentor, a community leader, a creator, a student again, a volunteer, an advocate, an artist, a storyteller, a fitness inspiration, a grandparent who doesn't just babysit, but shapes legacy. Let's talk about that word for a moment. Legacy. Legacy is not just money you leave behind. It's not just property or investments. Legacy is influence. It's the courage you model. It's the example you set. It's the proof you offer that growth doesn't stop at 60. Imagine your grandchildren watching you learn something new at 72. Imagine them seeing you refuse to complain about aging and instead embrace it with curiosity. Imagine them saying one day, "My grandmother started her own project after retirement," or "My grandfather decided to get healthy at 68 and inspired all of us." That is legacy in motion. And let's address something else honestly. Aging in America can sometimes feel isolating. Friends move away, some pass on, children build their own busy lives. The workplace community disappears overnight. Loneliness can quietly creep in. Reinvention is also an antidote to isolation. When you decide to grow again, you reconnect. You meet people in classes, in volunteer groups, in fitness programs, in community organizations, in online spaces. You begin conversations. You share stories. You realize that you are not the only one asking, "What's next?" And suddenly, life feels dynamic again. Now, I'm not suggesting you ignore reality. Yes, your body may require more care. Yes, energy levels change. Yes, you may need to be smarter about risk. But being smart is different from being afraid. Fear says, "It's too late." Wisdom says, "Let's do this carefully." There is a huge difference. The truth is, many people don't actually retire from work. They retire from growth. And that's when life starts to shrink. But growth is not reserved for the young. Growth is human. As long as you are breathing, you are capable of growth. Maybe your reinvention isn't about money at all. Maybe it's about meaning. Maybe it's about service. Maybe it's about finally healing parts of yourself you ignored for decades because you were too busy surviving. Thriving after retirement isn't about proving something to the world. It's about honoring the fact that you are still here, still capable, still valuable. Let me ask you something directly. If you had 10 more strong, healthy years ahead of you, how would you spend them? Would you spend them worrying about whether you're relevant? Or would you spend them building something, experiencing something, sharing something? 10 years is a long time. Entire businesses are built in 10 years. Entire bodies are transformed in 10 years. Entire communities are impacted in 10 years. And many of you likely have more than that ahead of you. The biggest obstacle is not age, it's belief. If you believe you're done, you'll act like you're done. If you believe your best days are behind you, you'll relive them instead of creating new ones. But if you decide even quietly, even privately, that you are entering a new season of growth, everything shifts. Your posture changes, your conversations change, your daily habits change. You start waking up with intention again. You stop saying, "I'm just retired," and start saying, "I'm exploring something new." You stop introducing yourself by who you used to be and start introducing yourself by who you are becoming. That shift is powerful. And here's the beautiful part. You don't need permission. You don't need society's approval. You don't need a corporation's validation. You don't need to be featured in a magazine. Reinvention can be quiet. It can happen in your garage, your garden, your kitchen, your laptop, your local community center. But it must begin with a decision. A decision that you are not done yet. A decision that your life still has chapters unwritten. A decision that retirement is not a waiting room. It's a launch pad. So if you've been feeling stuck, if you've been feeling overlooked, if you've been feeling like the world has moved on without you, I want you to hear this clearly. The world still needs your wisdom, your steadiness, your perspective, your calm strength in a time when everything feels loud and rushed. You are not outdated, you are seasoned, and there is a difference. This is not the closing scene of your life, this is intermission, and after intermission, the second act often carries the deepest meaning. You're not done yet, and this next chapter, it might just be the one you are finally free enough to write your way. So now that we've established something important that you're not done yet, the next question becomes, how? How do you actually reinvent yourself after retirement? How do you move from inspiration to action without feeling overwhelmed? How do you begin again when the world seems faster, more digital, and sometimes more complicated than ever? First, Understand this. Reinvention does not require a dramatic leap. It requires a deliberate step. Too many people think change has to be massive to matter. They think they need to launch a business tomorrow, run a marathon next month, or completely transform their lives overnight. That kind of pressure stops people before they even begin. Reinvention at this stage of life is about intentional momentum, not reckless speed. Start small, start honest. Ask yourself one simple question. What makes me feel alive right now? Not what used to make you feel alive in 1985. Not what impressed your coworkers in 1999. What makes you feel curious today? Curiosity is the spark of reinvention. When you feel curious, you feel young. When you feel interested, you feel engaged. And engagement is the opposite of aging mentally. Maybe you're curious about technology. Instead of saying, "I'm too old for that," what if you took a class at your local community center? What if you asked your grandchild to teach you something about social media instead of dismissing it? Not because you need to become an influencer, but because learning stretches your mind. Maybe you're curious about fitness again. Maybe you've been telling yourself, "I'll never get back into shape." But what if your goal isn't to look 30? What if your goal is to feel strong at 70? To climb stairs without hesitation? To carry groceries confidently? To walk through airports without fear of fatigue? Strength at this stage of life is freedom. Maybe you're curious about entrepreneurship. And I know that word can sound intimidating, but entrepreneurship today doesn't always mean renting office space and hiring employees. It might mean selling handmade crafts online, consulting part-time using the skills you've built over decades, tutoring students in a subject you mastered years ago, starting a small service in your local community. Your experience is valuable. There are people who would gladly pay to learn what you know. But let's go deeper than activities. Reinvention isn't only external, it's internal. Many seniors carry something heavy into retirement. Regret. Regret about risks not taken, words not spoken, dreams postponed, time spent chasing security instead of passion. And when you finally slow down, those thoughts can get louder. Here's the truth about regret. It can either freeze you or fuel you. You can sit in a chair and replay what you didn't do, or you can say, "I may not have done it then, but I can still do something now." You may not become a concert pianist at 75, but you can take piano lessons and play for your own joy. You may not become a professional athlete, but you can become the healthiest version of yourself. You may not rewrite your entire past, but you can absolutely rewrite your next decade. The past is fixed, the future is flexible. Another powerful step in reinvention is redefining productivity. For most of your life, productivity meant earning. It meant paychecks, promotions, providing, output, measurable results. Now productivity can mean impact. Mentoring a young professional who feels lost in their career, volunteering at a local school and reading to children, supporting veterans, helping at food banks, serving in your church or community organization, offering guidance to someone going through a divorce, a career change, or a crisis. Do not underestimate how much your calm presence can mean to someone navigating chaos. You've lived through enough to know that most problems are survivable. That perspective alone is priceless in today's anxious world. And here's something that might challenge you a little. Reinvention sometimes requires letting go of the identity you've held for decades. If you were a high-level executive, it might be humbling to start something small. If you were the primary breadwinner, it might feel strange to pursue something that doesn't generate significant income. If you were known as the expert in your field, it might feel uncomfortable to be a beginner again. But being a beginner is not weakness, it's courage. When you step into something new, you're telling yourself, "I am still capable of growth." That belief strengthens you in ways no paycheck ever could. There's also the emotional side of retirement that many people don't talk about openly. The loss of structure. For 40 or 50 years, your days had rhythm. Alarm clock, commute, meetings, lunch breaks, deadlines, weekend anticipation. That rhythm disappears almost overnight. And without structure, days can blur together. Reinvention thrives on structure. Create a new rhythm. Decide that 3 mornings a week are for fitness, 2 afternoons are for learning, 1 day is for volunteering. Even leisure becomes more enjoyable when it's intentional rather than endless. When every day feels like Saturday, Saturday loses its meaning. And let's talk honestly about fear. Not the loud, dramatic kind, the quiet kind. The whisper that says, "What if I fail? What if I embarrass myself? What if I'm not as capable as I think?" Failure at 25 feels like disaster. Failure at 70 is education. You've already survived bigger setbacks than a failed hobby or a small business idea that doesn't take off. You've endured economic downturns, personal losses, health scares, family struggles. A new attempt that doesn't work out is not tragedy, it's information. And the beautiful thing about this stage of life is that you don't need to prove anything to anyone. You're not building a resume anymore. You're building fulfillment. There's tremendous freedom in that. Another essential part of thriving after retirement is protecting your health not obsessively, not fearfully, but respectfully. Your body carried you through decades of responsibility. Now it deserves attention, regular movement, balanced nutrition, adequate sleep, preventive care. Not because you're trying to reverse time, but because you want to maximize it. Energy expands opportunity. When you feel physically strong, you're more likely to travel, to socialize, to explore, to experiment. When your health declines unnecessarily, your world shrinks. So part of reinvention is simply deciding, I will not neglect myself anymore. And while we're on this subject, let's talk about mindset toward aging itself. In America, youth is often glorified, wrinkles are hidden, gray hair is dyed, slower pace is criticized. But aging is not something to apologize for, it's an achievement. Every wrinkle represents survival, every gray hair represents experience, every scar represents resilience. You don't need to compete with younger generations. You bring something different to the table: stability, depth, long-term thinking, patience, discernment. Imagine what would happen if instead of comparing yourself to youth, you embraced your distinct advantage. Reinvention is not about becoming younger, it's about becoming more fully yourself. And let me say something directly to those of you who feel invisible. Maybe you walk into rooms now and people assume you're out of touch. Maybe you feel dismissed in conversations about technology or modern culture. Maybe you sense that society celebrates what's new and overlooks what's seasoned. Do not internalize that. Your value does not decrease because trends change. Your value comes from character, integrity, endurance, and wisdom built over time. Those qualities never go out of style. Thriving after retirement also means choosing community intentionally. If you surround yourself only with people who complain about aging, you will absorb that energy. If every conversation revolves around aches, medications, and nostalgia, your spirit will shrink. But if you find even a small group of people who are curious, engaged, and forward-thinking regardless of age, your outlook will transform. Energy is contagious. And finally, understand that reinvention does not mean abandoning rest. Rest is earned. Rest is sacred. You deserve peaceful mornings and slow coffee and unhurried evenings. But there's a difference between rest and resignation. Rest restores you. Resignation reduces you. You have the right to slow down. You do not have the obligation to disappear. So here you are, in a country that is constantly evolving, in a culture that moves quickly, in a season of life that offers freedom many people envy. You can either retreat quietly into comfort, or you can step forward intentionally into growth. You don't need to move mountains, you just need to move yourself. One new class, one new habit, one new conversation, one new commitment to your health, one new creative project, one new way to serve. Small steps compound, months turn into years, and one day you look back and realize that retirement wasn't an ending at all. It was the doorway to a version of yourself you never had time to explore. You're not done yet, and what you choose to do next could become the most inspiring chapter of your entire life. As we come into this final part, I want you to pause for just a moment and really think about something. One day, years from now, someone will tell your story. It might be your children. It might be your grandchildren. It might be a friend sitting at a kitchen table remembering the way you handled this season of your life. And when they tell that story, what will they say about your retirement years? Will they say, that's when they slowed down and faded out? Or will they say, that's when they came alive in a whole new way? Because make no mistake, this chapter matters. In fact, this chapter may define you more than the decades you spent working. When you were building a career, you were responding to responsibility. When you were raising a family, you were responding to necessity. But now you are responding to choice. And choices made in freedom reveal who we really are. This is where legacy deepens. Legacy is not about being famous. It's not about having your name on a building. It's about the emotional imprint you leave behind. It's about the example you set when life gives you the option to coast and you decide to grow instead. Your grandchildren are watching how you age. Your friends are watching how you handle change. Your community is watching whether you shrink or expand in this season. And the most important person watching is you. You are teaching yourself every day what's possible at your age. If you wake up and say, "I'm too old," you reinforce limitation. If you wake up and say, "I'm still capable," you reinforce power. The story you tell yourself becomes the life you live. Let's talk about purpose for a moment. Not the loud, dramatic kind. Not the kind that requires a spotlight, but the quiet, steady kind that gives your mornings meaning. Purpose might be mentoring one young person consistently. It might be becoming the steady presence in your family who listens without judgment. It might be building something small but meaningful in your community. It might be mastering a craft simply because it brings you joy. Purpose does not retire. As long as you are breathing, there is something you can give. A word of encouragement, a lesson learned, a skill practiced, a kindness extended. And here's something profound about this stage of life. You finally understand what truly matters. You know now that stress over small things is wasted energy. You know that time is precious. You know that relationships matter more than titles. You know that health cannot be taken for granted. You know that money is a tool, not an identity. That clarity is a gift. You spent decades earning wisdom. Why would you now choose to sit on it? Thriving after retirement is not about staying busy to avoid boredom. It's about staying engaged to honor your existence. And yes, there will be slower days. There will be doctor appointments. There will be moments when energy dips. There may be seasons of grief as friends pass on or circumstances change. This is real life. Reinvention does not mean denying reality. It means responding to reality with courage instead of surrender. Courage at 70 looks different than courage at 30. At 30, courage might be taking a financial risk. At 70, courage might be walking into a new social group alone. At 30, courage might be launching a startup. At 75, courage might be starting over physically after a health scare and committing to rebuild strength. Courage evolves, but it never expires. You have survived too much to underestimate yourself now. Think about everything you've already overcome. Economic downturns, personal disappointments, losses that reshaped your heart, changes in technology that forced you to adapt, cultural shifts that demanded flexibility. You are still here. That alone proves resilience. So instead of asking, "How much time do I have left?" maybe ask, "What can I still build with the time I have?" Because time, whether it's 10 years or 20, is still time. And time used intentionally is powerful. There is something deeply inspiring about someone who refuses to let age define their limits. Not because they are pretending to be younger, but because they are fully embracing who they are now. You don't need to chase youth. You need to maximize wisdom. You don't need to prove your relevance. You need to express your authenticity. You don't need to compete with the next generation. You need to complement them. Imagine becoming a bridge between generations, sharing stories that anchor younger people in perspective, listening to their ideas without dismissing them, learning from them while they learn from you. That exchange keeps you sharp, it keeps you connected, it keeps you alive in ways that isolation never could. And let me gently challenge you with something important. If there is still a dream in your heart, something you quietly think about but rarely say out loud, why are you waiting? Waiting for what? Perfect health? Perfect confidence? Perfect timing? You've lived long enough to know that perfect conditions rarely arrive. Life has always required movement despite uncertainty. So maybe it's time to write that book. Maybe it's time to take that trip across the country. Maybe it's time to mend that relationship. Maybe it's time to forgive someone or yourself. Maybe it's time to step into leadership in a way you avoided before. Not recklessly, not foolishly, but boldly. Because here's the truth. Regret weighs more heavily in later years than effort ever will. You may try something and discover it's not for you. That's fine. But trying and adjusting feels far better than wondering and wishing. This chapter of your life can be lighter not because it lacks seriousness, but because it lacks unnecessary pressure. You no longer have to climb ladders that don't matter to you. You no longer have to impress people who won't be at your bedside someday. You get to choose depth over status, meaning over applause, peace over competition. And that is powerful. As we close this message, I want you to imagine yourself 5 years from now. Not older in a fearful way, but stronger in a purposeful way. What decisions would that future version of you thank you for making today? Would they thank you for finally prioritizing your health? For reaching out to build community? For starting that small project? For saying yes to growth instead of no out of habit? You still have influence. You still have impact. You still have time to shape how this season unfolds. Retirement is not a retreat from life. It is an invitation to redesign it. You are not done contributing. You are not done learning. You are not done growing. You are not done inspiring. And most importantly, you are not done becoming. So stand up in this season. Not physically if you can't, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Decide that your story continues with intention. Decide that the phrase "I'm retired" will never mean "I'm finished." Let it mean "I'm free." Free to explore, free to serve, free to build, free to rest with purpose, free to live fully. You've earned this season. Now own it, because you're not done yet. And the best way to prove that is to live like it.